All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting for Wednesday, March 13th, and it is 5:35 p.m. And we'll go ahead and get started with roll call, please. Ms. Vasquez.
Councilmember Yao.
Present.
Councilmember Lorimore.
Present.
Councilmember Tassari.
Here.
Mayor Rigby.
Here.
Councilmember Plott is currently marked absent.
And he did say he'll be here in just a couple minutes. So,
Perfect.
moving on to item number 3, public comments. Any member of the public may address the council on items within the council's subject matter jurisdiction, which are not listed on this agenda during public comments. However, no action may be taken on matters that are not part of the posted agenda. We request comments made on the agenda be made at the time the item is considered, and that comments be limited to 3 minutes per person. Please address your comments to the council as a whole, and do not engage in dialogue with the individual council members, city staff, or members of the audience. Once again, just as a reminder, this is just for the budget session for our normal, or for our special council meeting. If you have a comment regarding agenda item on our normal meeting, you can do that at a later time. Do we have any public comments?
No, sir, we have not received any.
We have not received any, so we'll move on to item number 4. City Council business. 4.1 budget session, number 2, goal setting session and public safety. And this will be by Mr. Reyna.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the City Council. So we have before you today is the budget goal setting session number 2. 2 weeks ago, we did have number 1 that focused on everything on the strategic plan, the targets, everything other than public safety. And so today's meeting today will be just strictly on public safety. We'll cover fire first, and then we'll spend some time talking about our police services as well. So to kick this off, we're going to go ahead and get started with fire services coming up for the fiscal year 1920. So just to paint a picture of where we currently stand with our expenditures and what public safety is comprised of, 65% of our general fund budget goes towards public safety, to give you an idea of where we stand. And that is further broken down, of course, by police and fire. So of that 65%, here's what that looks like. 2/3 of that cost of the 65% is made up of the police, and 1/3 is the fire cost. Again, painting the picture of where we stand so we know where we're going with that. Some of the historical and projected costs for fire services over the past 5 years and including up through 1920 are listed here. The first 2 years you see there, fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17, we did have some higher costs. And that was because of Fire Station 31, where we had some additional equipment and building costs that we had. And then you can see it kind of come back down and kind of level off where it's at right now. So there has been roughly about a 3% increase year over year. And that's kind of where we're anticipating for fiscal year 1920 at this point. And so just as a reminder, we did, at the mid-year budget, we did a presentation on how fire services are funded. And so what we're looking at for year 1920 is about $6.3 million in revenue for fire services. And again, that comes from that 1% sale property tax, where 6.5% comes off of that 1%. And so we're projecting $6.3 million. So as you keep that number in mind, we have some options for the upcoming year. We have 4 options we'd like to present to council. The first option is to maintain our current staffing with CAL FIRE. That's that CAL FIRE contract. And for 1920, it's looking to be about $4.8 million. Another option is to have some shared costs with Jurupa Valley, and that would be for a brand new engine. And that cost is about $5.3 million. The third option would be to add a medic squad at Station 27, which would be about $6 million. And then finally, we could add a medic engine at Station 27, and that would be about $6.4 million. Any one of these 4 options would still require us to add about roughly $200,000 for operational costs. They're not included in the CAL FIRE budget itself. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to CAL FIRE, and I believe Richard Tovar is going to be making a short presentation on CAL FIRE and what they do for the city of Eastville. So I'm going to hand it off to him.
Good evening, Mayor Rigby, City Council, Rich Tovar, Jurupa Valley Battalion Chief. So we did our information gathering. We got historical and current data from our CAD. We have the most sophisticated CAD made by Northrop Grumman. our guiding documents were basically the fire master plan, the fire strategic plan, and the standards of covers. Standard of cover was presented approximately 3 years ago, and it was an agency that came in, third party, for the county to pretty much evaluate our fire services for the county. We also got the data from the National Institute of Standards and Technology and National Fire Protection Association. So in 2010, when Eastvale was still unincorporated, the city incorporated back in 2010. Station 27 responded to approximately 500 calls. And those 500 calls were pretty much in the area just south of the city because of the dairies that were on the north side. This included all emergency and medical services out of those 499 calls. The city of Eastvale relied on the Cooperative Integrated Fire Service Agreement that you're a part of to supplement their intake and assistance for mutual aid. So this incorporated Station 17, which is on the north side. Just east of there is Station 16, 47 on the south, and 57 on the southwest, which are Norco City stations. In 2018, Station 27 and Station 31 came in play. We're now running 3,180 calls for emergency and medical and fire services. It's a progressive increase, approximately 346 calls annually. And we say call, it's not a call, just a 10, 15-minute call. Some are 8 hours, some are an hour. So there is a formula we can show you on another slide, but basically it breaks it down per call. Station 16 and Station 17 assisted approximately 376 calls annually into the city of Eastvale. We incorporated 57 and 47 for a total of 597 times that those engines came into the city, with our engines assisting other cities at 162. Keep in mind, those are border fires, either on the freeway or just east of the city limits. Total call volume for 2018 in the city of Eastvale is going to be 3556. So the 7-minute drive time map, the way the city is built, it's pretty much like its own little peninsula. It's not too wide, but the amount of traffic you get. And we look at density as a major factor of how we respond to calls. So the 7-minute drive time with current fire station location, which is at Station 27 on Hamner, with lights and siren on a good day, doesn't take into account traffic conditions, weather conditions, time of day, holidays, population, traffic increases, or traffic lights. Our CAT is designed to take into account every street light, dip, medians, everything. So it's all incorporated in there. On a good day with nobody out on the streets, it's taking us about 7 minutes. Due to the population density and additional commercial development on North Eastvale, additional fire companies will be needed to sustain current levels of exceptional fire services that the city of Eastvale provides. So with that being said, you still have a lot of vacant lots on the north side. The squad for now will be a supplement to that fire service that we provide now. Engine 27 and Engine 31 being in quarters, if they respond to any structure fire in the city, it allows the city to still be covered with the squad. So in 2018, the response times for Station 27, 69% of the calls were below the 5-minute mark, meaning that's a national standard. 1,794 calls to be exact. Above the 5-minute mark, it was 698 calls. Most of these calls are on the north side. For Station 31, 72% of the calls are below the 5-minute mark. And it's just due to the way the streets are built. There's a lot of inaccessible roads just due to construction, so that takes it in effect and is also a factor. 28% are also above the 5-minute mark, which is about 290 calls. So by providing the squad, one thing, it's going to provide one company officer and one paramedic additionally every day. Increases survivability and provides additional staffing for all multi-unit calls in the city of Eastvale. So one full rest, which is a heart condition, requires 2 engine response. So with that, we can still keep 1 engine available, and it would be a medic, squad, and engine response. So the city will, for the most part, be always covered. And it also ensures that there's always an available unit to respond in the city. Decreases the reliability for regional assistance, meaning Station 17, 16, 47, and 57 making their way into the city. With 20% of those calls on average based on a second unit response. We have it predetermined due to our new system, which is EMD and EFD, which basically triages our calls. So a nosebleed isn't a light and siren call. So it's triaged at our dispatch center. That puts 5 firefighters on duty each day at Station 27. And also it assists Engine 27 with increase in call volume on the north side of Eastvale. Thank you.
So with that information that Richard Tovar just presented, I'm going to go back to the slide where I showed the 4 options. And the information he presented was on the medic squad, and that was option 3. But we do have 4 options in front of you to entertain and look at in terms of where we want to go. But again, what he just presented was option 3 on the medic squad. If we went that route, there would be enough in funding to cover that for fiscal year 1920. Again, the revenues coming in with about 6.3 million. So even with the medic squad at 6 million plus another 2, we would be right there at that amount. So enough to cover that that amount. So with that, I'll pause, and if there's any questions from council, I'd be more than happy to answer, or Richard Tovar as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief Tovar, for the presentation. Council, do we have any questions?
Yes.
Start down at the end with Mr. Tsari.
Yeah, this is for Ernie. If do we see a point in the near future where the fire revenues are going to level off and we're not going to see any more increases in the actual revenue that we're receiving?
It's really based on property tax. So as things are reassessed, if we do hit a recession, it could go down. But I don't see that happening. All signs are forecasting us to remain flat or slight increase. I don't see them going down anytime soon.
And with nearly $100 million being invested at the Merge project by that developer, that's property tax that is now going from farmland to commercial development, with the station being developed, with the Palopolis project being developed in the future, with Walmart site being developed. These are all commercial, retail, and industrial properties where millions of dollars hundreds of millions, if not close to billions of dollars, are being invested in our community. And that doesn't take into account the Leo property developing and how we develop the Leo property. And you missed the presentation from Urban 3, but when they were talking about how to increase the value added by land, our property taxes help support. So the more we added value of development in land, we can increase our fire revenues that are coming into the community. So the less parking lots and if we use less roadways or less asphalt for parking lots and roadways, we can have more developed property taxes in our community. And so those are some of the things we're looking at.
Yeah, those revenue streams sound encouraging. So
Yeah.
and as far as
So none of these property taxes include any of that development occurring. So
got it. Thank you.
We'll jump over to Councilmember Plot real quick.
Yeah, just actually the question in regards to Brian, do we know exactly what, I mean, not exactly, but to some extent what the new commercial developments that were, and the retail developments, what we would gain out of those property taxes? Or Ernie, maybe you may know, just as far as an assessment or something that we can go off of?
we can make estimates, but not until they get actually developed and when they develop. So we don't know how fast they are going to develop and what types of businesses that are going to go into them. Because if an industrial building comes in and they invest hundreds of millions of dollars into the tenant improvements, that all goes into the building property values.
So there's really can't have a forecast, really, an accurate forecast.
It's a little bit difficult at this point.
Yeah, too soon.
Thank you.
Before we continue on with council member questions and comments, do we have any public comments regarding this item?
No, sir, we didn't
Okay.
receive any.
Thank you. Councilmember Yao.
I thank you, Chief, for your the presentation on the third option. But I am I missing it? Do you think it's possible to elaborate a little bit on option 2 and option 4, and then also for option 2, and this question is for Ernie. when you did this calculation for new engine, are we also including additional firefighters? Like, is this amount reflecting that, or
So-
is this just?
So I can answer that question. All of these include the staffing and the costs. And so it's the staff for an engine versus a squad car. An engine is 3 firefighters or a firefighter, a captain and an engineer. And then the squad car has 2. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so that's the difference in that amount right there. And so we have not explored shared costs with Harupa Valley for a new engine. That would require us to identify some place for a fire station to do a shared cost with them, or have it at one of our existing stations, which really doesn't help us in serving this North Peninsula to a great degree yet. So ultimately, we're going to need to do a long-term projection of fire services based on our projected land use and density in our community, and identify where we might need a 3rd station or a 4th station someday in the future. But we need to evaluate that based on how we're going to design the Leal Master Plan and what we do in this shopping center and how the rest of the city develops.
Councilmember Lorimore.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. We'll start since this one's up. The addition of a medic squad, that would utilize the equipment that we already have?
Yes. We have a squad truck in Station 27 right now that's sitting mothballed.
Okay, but that cost reflects that?
Yes.
Okay. And if I could ask, in terms of calls, I appreciated the comment about being able to triage at the call center. So would a medic squad be able to go out on its own?
So according to our standard response plan, we actually have it laid out for every type of call: train derailment, traffic collision, cut and rescue. Engine 27 is a cut and rescue module, so basically it has its own module, so they can veer off medical-wise. The medic squad can handle all medical aids, and the engine handles off-fire calls. But the way it triages, if you're having a heart attack, that's going to be a 2-engine response. So this way, it's going to be a medic squad and engine, leaving your engine still available at Station 31, or vice versa. But by triage, yes, we do have pre-delivery and post-delivery instructions that our dispatcher would be talking to you as far as if it truly is an emergency, they'll just send the squad. If it's not an emergency, then, it's basically going to be an AMR/BLS call.
Okay. All right, so by adding this, they would always, every time an engine goes out, the medic squad would roll with them?
Not necessarily. If
Okay.
it's just it's a public service assist, that's a 1 engine or 1 squad. So you're not having that redundancy of services.
Yeah.
You're always leaving 1 unit behind, but for the most part, it's covering the north side,
Okay.
where most of our calls are starting to come in from the Limonite area, moving forward, Swan Lake and so on.
So, would it always be, would, I think I understood you to say, and I just want to make clear, so a medic squad could go out on its own and the fire truck would stay behind?
Yes.
Okay, all right, excellent, thank you.
Which could reduce the wear and tear on the engine as well.
Councilmember Plott. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for you, Ernie. Quick question just on the budget or the proposed budget for the fire fund. My question's more theoretical, and I kind of want to get your thoughts and opinion on what the best approach is when we're budgeting fire, basically our fire services. Since we're talking about the general fund, but the difference between your funding policing and the fires, unrestricted versus restricted funding.
That's correct.
When we're looking at the property tax services, which is more allocated to fire funding, do you come at the idea that it's best to almost spend, because it's restricted, is it best to spend the money you're getting in the fire fund Or is it better to kind of save that? But it's, again, we're talking about a restricted fund, so I kind of want to know the theory in your perspective. Is it better to kind of use the money that we have in the fire fund?
Sure.
If so, how much should we spend? How much should we put away? I know we're talking about the general fund, it's always trying to, hey, let's build the
No.
reserves, but the fire fund, because it's restricted, there's not much you can do with it other than spending it on
Right,
fire
right.
services.
No, it's a great question, and
Just want to get your thoughts on that.
I pulled up this slide again that shows the costs in the past. What we have historically done is when we need those monies, we've used them. Situations where fire stations are being built or equipment needs to be purchased, we'll spend more than, we spend the amount that we have. And so you can see in 16, 17 when we did that. And the years after that, we didn't spend all the money we had. So it's kind of best to take the approach of, you spend what you need, and the years that you need more. In this situation where we're increasing about 1.2 million, but we still have enough funds in that account. We're basically breaking even for 1920. And so that still leaves us some for the following year. Should we need to look into the future to build a future fire station, would be a good idea to leave some of that in there just for future use. So it's not necessarily necessary that you would have to spend it all that year, but if you can save some left over, put it aside for future use, that would be great as well.
At a theory percentage, what's the good for spending versus saving?
Yeah, I mean, and looking at what we've done, we've probably spent 75, 80% of it every year. So, I mean, we could set aside 20, 25% and gone from there.
Then second question is, off the top of your head, you remember what our current fund balance is right now in the restricted fire?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but I can definitely look into that and bring it back to this council. Maybe
I think it'd be good.
Yeah,
to
for sure.
have that as well,
Yeah,
just
I
to
don't-
see the whole perspective of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just got a couple of quick questions. On the call response, how often, what percentage would you say of the calls, Chief Tovar, that they are responding from call to call versus station to call?
From call to call, you're looking pretty much 8 to 10 steady. Most of your calls happen during the evening hours, traffic time. But from call to call to what was the second?
From call to call versus station to call?
Because we have automatic vehicle locator. So for instance, if 27's in quarters, they're going to respond from quarters. If they're out and about and 31's closer, it's going to suggest 31. So there's really no data that I can give you that would be like, oh, okay, well, they're running a call. They get a second call. They're advised through their radio system, but also through our CAT system, which is an MDC on the rig. So because we use satellite tracking on every rig, we know what's going to be the appropriate response for the type of call that's going to be dispatched to.
So there's no way to really tell that, because a lot of the time they'll know that that rig's already being used and send a
Different
call
rig.
to another.
Yes, so
Right,
like with
okay.
the 597 calls that come in, that's engine 16 picking up the additional call for 27. They do prompt 27, additional call in your area, are you available? Negative. Because we don't cut services. We basically cradle to grave our calls. Because you need to have that closure, and also because of the paperwork, but engine 16 will be responding, engine 17 will be responding. So if you do become available, you can prompt the dispatcher, or the dispatcher is going to say, respond. So our technology is very, very accurate, real time.
Okay, thank you. And these costs, going back to slide number 8, these costs for the additional medic squad or additional medic engine, those are not including to purchase any squad or engine, right? It's just the labor, and we lease the units rather than purchase them, correct?
So with the squad, you purchased it a couple years ago. It was actually 2016, prior to engine 31 coming online, or station 31. When station 31 came online, the equipment from the squad, partial equipment, was moved to engine 31. So because you are on the lease agreement on that engine, you don't pay the outright price of 1.2 million. So it benefits the city by leasing, because all the wear and tear is covered under that lease. No different than leasing a vehicle.
Okay.
But that ensures that you always have a very roadworthy vehicle, even at 50,000 miles, when they rotate them to slower stations.
So we own
Can
the
you share-
we own the squad car, but we do not own the engine.
The
We lease the
engines.
engines. The squad
Just-
car is a much more affordable apparatus to run.
Just to kind of share with the public, can you share any examples of how that benefits the city?
Yes, so if we get hit, which happens pretty frequent, nobody pulls over or whatnot, and crashes the engine, you're out of an engine. Meaning you're gonna have to go out and borrow or lease an engine from a cooperator, which runs about 20,000 to 30,000 depending on the type of engine you lease. With the lease agreement that you have, with Riverside County Fire Department, it's all inclusive, so all wear and tear, maintenance, everything is covered under that lease agreement. When you buy, you gotta, pretty much start saving for the next engine the day you pay for it.
And that was something that I wasn't I didn't fully understand, and I appreciate, we kind of talked about this a little bit prior regarding one of our engines, just how much of a benefit it is that we do lease rather than buy when you have anything major happen, such as we have had with our engines, that it's immediately replaced.
So, for example, engine 27 blew a head of gasket this last weekend. Manufacturer's covering it, but we're out of a rig. It's not like your vehicle that's under warranty, they're gonna loan you one. There is no loan. So we actually have a replacement engine for that until the engine comes back. And that's part of the lease agreement also.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Any other questions or direction that we may be able to give to staff on what we would like to see? Councilmember, sorry.
Yeah, I'm in favor of item 3 for the proposals because it keeps us under what the budget is. And it would give us the opportunity next fiscal year to utilize whatever excess revenue is in there to go ahead with an engine. And the vast majority of our calls are for paramedics. So I think that's really what what's best for the community at this point.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Councilmember Lorimer?
I concur.
It's the same. Yep.
Same here.
I think we have a consensus to
Thank you.
budget on item number 3.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Reyna,
Yes.
we'll let you continue.
We are moving forward, so the second part of our discussion is going to highlight police services, so I'm going to navigate my way through that, so. All right, so with police services for fiscal year 1920, just showing you that same chart we saw before where public safety is about 65% of our general fund, just keep that number in mind as we go forward with it. What this chart is showing is budget numbers from 15-16 through 19-20. And as we look through the years, we've seen that the costs that we have budgeted have increased 74% over the past 5 years. Now, to qualify that, just to look at the rates that the RSO has provided to us back in 15-16, they began at $160.22. And we're projecting that in 1920, they'd go up to about 209.53. So over that course of 5 years, the rate itself will have increased about 31%. So just to keep that in mind as we roll forward with
The additional increase there is when we increased hours
Yeah.
hours and also the motor, I believe.
and also an additional motor.
Right.
To that point, how many hours have we increased during that in 2015 to now? Was it 20? How many total? Do you remember? And how many motor? And just one additional
We
motor
went from
officer, correct?
80 to 90 hours, and then last year you authorized 90 to 100 hours, but we have not experienced the 100 hours yet. And we're not paying for it yet.
And one motor officer increase.
And one motor officer increase.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay,
And we've received the motor officer
correct.
starting February 14th.
So in terms of options for police, we do have 2 options before you that we'd like to talk about for 1920. So the first is to maintain our current contract with RSO, which if we stayed, we projecting would be about $11.8 million for the year. The second option is to look into and create Eastvale Police Department. And so we had a proposal done, a feasibility study. And what the study mentioned was that we could start this police department effective July 1st, as early as July 1st of 2020. If we did so, we would put budget for some of the items in fiscal year 1920 that would amount to about $6 million. That $6 million, the majority of that is made up of capital costs for vehicles and for the equipment, for that to start up. It would also include some personnel, which would be for a police chief and 2 other positions that would come aboard sometime in 1920 and try to fill the most of the year to design that department for us. And so that would be budgeted into the 1920 fiscal year. As we move forward into the first year, as we activated our police department in fiscal year 2021, we can do a quick comparison of what RSO could provide to us versus what we could get out of our own police department if we did move forward with that. And so looking at first the cost, in 2021, it would be projected that RSO's contract would be about $12.9 million versus $11.2 million for our own internal Eastville Police Department. That $12.9 million for RSO would get us the same 100 hours of service hours we get per day. And beginning with our Eastville Police Department, with the budget we created, would get us about 150 hours per day. And so right off the bat, what we're projecting is a savings of close to $1.7 million for that first year alone. Again, more service hours and the savings there, and creating our own police department. And looking further out into 5 years, again, if we're budgeting costs based on what we have now for RSO over 5 years, that contract price would roughly be about $74.8 million. Eastville PD, what we're projecting to be about $68.3 million. So over that 5-year period, beginning in 2021 through 26, we're projecting there could be a potential savings of $6.5 million. At the peak of our police department, we would potentially get 210 hours of service per day, where that same contract for RSO would remain at about roughly 100 hours a day. So we'd have 110 hours, extra hours over what we currently have right now, and have a savings of roughly $6.5 million. In terms of staffing levels, what we're looking at is that first year that we'd kick off, we would have 44 sworn officers with 26 civilians, totaling 70 in total. By the end of the 5th year, we would jump up to 60 sworn officers with that same number of civilian personnel, and we now have 86 total personnel in that department. So growing quite a bit from there. And that's what we could potentially get. Because the public safety budget is such a large percentage, a cost, I should say, of our budget, one of the things that we've been examining is looking how to fund that. And so during our community satisfaction survey, question 17 asked the city and its residents, in order to help fund priority services and projects, voters in Eastville may be asked to vote on a local ballot measure in the future. And the services shall include, a portion of that was police patrols, crime prevention, fire protection, 911 response, but we also included in there street maintenance, such as pothole repairs, parks and rec, trails, and the like. And so what we did is, we did mention the sales tax ballot measure, and we found that 71% of our residents said that they would vote for it, either definitely or probably, but we did have 71% of the voters, of the people doing the survey did vote yes on that particular item. And so if we were to add a sales tax initiative, what it would do for us is create an additional $9.5 to $10 million to the general fund, which would be vitally important. What I'll show you in a future slide how that's going to work. And as far as cities around us that have done this same sales tax increase, recently the city of Norco did approve 1% sales increase, and we have a total of 7 cities in our western Riverside County that have done the same recently. And so this is a comparison of general funds. Excuse me. On the bottom there, you can see our city of Eastville with our general fund of $20.1 million roughly, with our 73,000 residents. And what we did is we took a percentage of our general fund of our population. And when you do that, the way we currently stand now, we have about $272.50 per person in our general fund. Comparing that to the top city, which being the city of Riverside, they have roughly $780 of general fund per person. If we were to have the 1% sales tax approved, That would, in the green bolded area there, you could see we go from $272 to up to $408. So it puts us roughly in that middle of that pack, right above Marietta, below Hemet. And that's pretty significant as we move forward because it helps us stay above water and stay in the black. And so what this slide is showing you, without any kind of additional revenue coming in, the blue represents our revenues currently right now. The green represents the expenditures. As you go forward through the years, when we get to fiscal year 2024, that's when our expenditures will exceed our revenues. And by fiscal year 2025, we'll see our expenditures far outweigh the revenues themselves. So without any kind of assistance from a sales tax initiative or another source of revenues, we will be in the red by 2024. So it's important to keep in mind, even if we don't go to our own police department, we need to think about doing something in the future. So this is kind of a way to get ahead of it all, and be a good way to do that. So at this point, if there's any questions with respect to direction on where we go, we do have 2 items to look at, either maintain our current position with RSO, or we can entertain the direction of going into our own police department. So I'm going to turn back over to council and let you go from there.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. 2 quick things just before we get into questions from council, or if there's any public comments regarding this one. We are not making a decision on a police department tonight, just for clarification. We are strictly looking at budgets right now. So we are not, just so everyone's on the same page, we are not looking at any kind of decision on forming a police department. We're looking at budgets. The other thing is this is, I just want to commend our current police department and what they've done for us. And that this is, once again, we're looking at budgets and not at anything, nothing against the sheriff's department at all. They've done a great job for us. With that being said, do we have any public comments regarding the law enforcement section of our study session?
No, sir, we don't.
Thank you. And we'll turn to council comments. Councilmember, sorry.
Based on what the study says, I think it's warranted to, further explore this and drill down on it and try and get more solid numbers on everything. And what would be the process of initiating a vote on the tax increase?
So, for the sales tax increase, what we would need to do is work with council to identify which election we would like to put it on. And there's some conversations that we can have about pros and cons of where we put that. The second thing we would need to do is have a resolution adopted by council authorizing that to happen. And then we would work to get that onto the ballot. And so we can prepare that information if that's a request of the council. The resolution from the council would not be you approving a sales tax measure. The resolution would just be you allowing the voters to determine whether they want to tax themselves. So you would not be imposing a tax on people. The voters of Eastville would be deciding whether they impose a tax, and all the revenues from that tax would stay local, unlike many other taxes imposed on our residents from the region and the state.
And what would the council have to do to get that ball rolling? Would we have to declare like a fiscal emergency or something?
It depends on which election you put it on. If you look to put it on the March 2020, then we could work on drafting the language to show that there's a fiscal need for this, to do it outside of an election or a council election seat, which would be November of 2020. The one challenge with November of 2020 is there's a lot of regional and state people or organizations or agencies looking to put taxes on our residents, and so that the money would not stay local or often come local, and so they could utilize some of our capacity of sales tax.
And if we did everything that we needed to do, what would be would the earliest be March? Would that be the earliest?
The March 2020 would be the first election that we could put it on.
Well, I would favor doing that just because it's fresh, and if we want to do something, we need to know if that revenue stream's going to be there.
Yes,
So that's the direction I would prefer to go.
yes.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Yao.
I have two questions. I know Councilmember Lori Moore had mentioned this previously, but I just want to make sure that the rate with RSO, is it fixed or is it negotiable or?
The rate by RSO is set by the County Board of Supervisors every
Okay.
year. And so they evaluate what their costs are and they tell us. It usually comes after we adopt our budget.
And then the second thing is the amount reflected here for, to start our own police department. Does that include pensions, benefits, all those hidden costs that might not affect us immediately, but long-term wise, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, how is that going to affect our budget?
So our CalPERS contract does not have a public safety component to it. But yes, all the analysis was done and the study was done, including all the fixed costs as well as the pension and the personnel costs and the salaries and the replacement costs of vehicles and whatnot.
Councilmember Lorimer.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. Going through the numbers presented tonight, it looks wonderful. But I have to admit, whenever somebody says, "Oh, well, you can get more for less," I sit there and I take pause, and I have to admit that I'm still not completely there. I know that staff has put in a lot of hard work on this. So that being said, if we can save money and we can be ahead, that's a great thing. And I want to reiterate, Sheriff's Department has been an amazing partner with the city of Eastvale. And so this is not a matter of how much we like the Sheriff's Department, because we love them. This is a question of dollars and cents. And, but that being said, if we were to go down this path, to even continue to explore it further, and I would love to see more community engagement on this, getting more feedback, having workshops, etc., publicizing this, what the residents from, I believe, our satisfaction survey said they would like to see. I still would like to really talk about these numbers in depth with the community and get feedback for that. But, so all that being said, I saw in here $6 million projection. That would be an additional for startup costs. That would be in addition to the 11.8 million that we would have to pay in the interim if we were to go down this path. So it's 18 million. Is there a smaller number than the 6 million that we don't have to go all in before getting community feedback?
So yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes. You don't have to spend, so a majority of that $6 million is purchasing patrol vehicles. So the patrol, and that's a one-time purchase for this next year. So the patrol vehicles are, I want to say about 3 or 4 million of that $6 million.
It's about 4 million, yeah.
So even if you were to put, so the part of it is, part of the startup costs would be hiring a police chief, hiring a police captain, and hiring an administrative manager to help set up a police department and make a police department part of a law enforcement agency at the state of California, and all the policies and procedures, and then how that could function is within about a 12-month period. That's what Citrus Heights set up their police department, and that's what Menifee is projecting to set up their police department, is from July 1 to July 1 of 2020. They're planning on going live with their own police department. And what Menifee is projecting to do is on June 1st of 2020, all of their sergeants and officers would start and they would train for a month and get all as many of the kinks out of their system before they went live. And so there'd be about a 1 month overlap of them training in the community before it went live. And that's what Menifee is projecting. And they're showing about a 12-month wind up for that. So part of the costs are also getting the police headquarters in working operations and putting in a 65-foot tall tower, getting the dispatch center in place, those kind of things. And then all the equipment that would be required for law enforcement.
Okay, thank you for the greater explanation on that. Is there, so that being said, is there a dollar amount that would enable us to continue to explore this without doing the $6 million budget set aside at this point?
So there are ways to offset that we could know if council decides in March 2020, there could be revenue from a sales tax measure that would help pay for some of this. Council also put the franchise agreements on a wind down notice. So part of that renegotiating that contract could bring a new revenue stream in to the city. And then third is, yes, we could say we won't authorize the patrol vehicle purchase until or authorize recruiting personnel until council does that. And so you would only be out the cost of a police chief and a police captain and an administrative manager before we start going down the recruitment process. So you could do something smaller.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Plott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple comments, and I have, I think, 2 questions. Ernie, thank you for putting this presentation together and the stats and the graphs and the bar sheets, everything you've done, the bar graphs, sorry, not bar sheets. They're very helpful in kind of putting this all together. Yeah, just 3 comments in regards to potentially having our own police department. I think there's 3 things, I mean, there probably could be more, but in my mind, there's really 3 things when we're considering this is, when making the decision is, and I know we're not making a decision tonight, but I think it's all part of, what trajectory do we want to go? And that is costs, future costs, right? And 74% increase over 5-6 years is pretty significant from a contractor, that is a very significant, and we're talking about boots on the ground, but that is a very high cost to eat, right? And when you look at that trajectory versus what we have in our own police department, you got to think of the future ahead, right? Not just the immediate costs that they're going to be saving to having our own police department. The second is obviously having more boots on the ground and having the actual level of public safety. And third is control. And the problem with contracts, and in particular with contracting out public safety services, is you deal with 2 government agencies that sometimes don't see eye to eye. That being the Board of Supervisors, who really controls the budget, right? And then the Sheriff's Department only controls the ministerial budget. And when sometimes those don't see eye to eye, you have more bureaucratic processes. And what happens is there's an infliction on the city, right? Because, well, for example, we've February of last year, we increased our 10 hours of patrol. Well, we still don't have that. And so that is the problem when you have too much processes. The beautiful point of this is that we don't have to really deal with that, right? We can control that and really control what we want. And I love that idea of embracing that. So, just that's the kind of way I look at these things when making the decision. I know that sometimes it can be daunting because you're kind of going on uncharted waters. But when you look at the things in front of you, I like what I see ahead. I think it's very promising. I think it's the right thing to do, is to look at kind of echoing what Councilmember Tessari said. I think it's something we really need to consider and to start planning for this. Two questions. When going through the peer review, and I'm just trying to, Ernie, when I was going through the peer review and just trying to base it on, and again, I'm just trying to think how I'm gonna phrase this question, and looking into your costs, are you taking, so in the peer review, it mentioned that in the first year, we're gonna be, we'll be paying for actually patrol, the cost will be all in there, and then we will be contracting out communication services in the first part of that year, communication services, SWAT, traffic division. In the third year, we'll be, and eventually the second year, we'll be having our own, the third year, we'd have our own. My question is, are those costs considered, are the contracting costs and then switching over to doing those communications ourselves, having our own dispatch at some point in the second and third year, is that all taken in consideration into those costs in this budget?
Yeah, so in the feasibility study, it's pretty comprehensive. We looked at all the options and what we couldn't do. In terms of communications, in terms of dispatch, that is something that's in the budget. That's something we intend on doing. Part of it is communications with installing certain antennas and, looking at locations and stuff like that. But we looked at every avenue, every possibility in the feasibility study. And then the peer review actually went back through, looked at everything else to make sure that we covered it all. So between the two studies, we got our bases covered there to ensure that we had a solid ground to stand on. And it's pretty solid to start. And we feel pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I might just,
Did I word that question okay? Because I don't know if that was confused. That makes sense? Okay.
so I might just ask council to pause for a second and consider, do you have a lot of questions to continue asking? And if you do, maybe what we can do is start the regular meeting at 6:30, and so we have a little bathroom break for a second, and then start the regular meeting at 6:30 and get some of that regular meeting taken care of, because we have a lot of people showing up here, and then we can either come back to this budget workshop, or we can finish the regular scheduled meeting and, or we can continue through this. So I just want to let you guys decide that, but I want to be respectful of all the people that are showing up for the regular scheduled meeting.
I just have one question.
I think it's best that we probably continue this discussion, and we
Okay.
go ahead and take a brief recess, and then we'll start a regular meeting in a few minutes. Is that all right? How do we do that
Can we just get a
appropriately?
motion to continue the special meeting to the adjournment of the regular meeting, or until some point at the regular meeting, wherever you'd like?
So like we can get through presentations and consent, and then we can go back to this, or however you would like to do.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember, sorry.
Yeah, I would move that we suspend this workshop, begin our regular session, and pick this up sometime during the actual meeting or at the end.
Why don't we can continue it after consent, so we can get through the presentations and consent, and then we can come back to it after that.
But it was just getting good.
I know, it was really good. Write down those thoughts, and then
Can I continue where I left off? Is that okay?
you can write down more questions.
To continue this workshop
only have
after the consent calendar.
Okay.
It's like a cliffhanger, so everybody's here is all excited about what might be said next, so they might stay and listen.
So we have a motion to continue to after the consent calendar by Councilmember Tesari.
Second.
Ms. Vasquez, please.
Councilmember Yao?
Yes.
Councilmember Lorimore?
Aye.
Councilmember Tesari? Yes. Councilmember Plott?
Yes.
Mayor Rigby?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So this meeting is going to be adjourned, and we will start our regular meeting in about 5 minutes. Thank you.